The identity of the Cabal is not easy to grasp. Always hidden behind a seemingly benign face, it really acts like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It seems to work in the world's interests, but is secretly gaining power to achieve that one precious goal, world dominance. It has not been easy to unravel or even grasp the reality of evil in our society. And now I'm even asking you to go a step further, to look at the role of the Cabal in our Western religion. Can you handle that? Are you open to the fact that everything you have been told was a lie? That you have to unlearn everything in order to progress in your life? What I am about to show you in this episode will be shocking. It will make an impact in your life for sure. If you don't want that, if you prefer the convenient lie over the inconvenient truth, then please stop here. No one will blame you for not being ready. You are responsible for your own sanity, for the information you take in. So only when you're ready, let's have a look at the third nail of power, religion. One cannot speak about religion and only cover one of the world's religions. But the focus of this episode is not about the world religions, nor its contents. We are talking about the three nails of power of the Cabal, with Vatican City being one of them. Vatican City is a fully independent city-state. Just like the city of London, it lays in the heart of the capital, Rome in Italy. It is governed by the Holy See, and it's the world's smallest nation-state, with only 500 inhabitants on 110 acres. Vatican City has its own telephone and postal system, radio and television station, astronomical observatory and banking system, as well as a contingent of Swiss guards responsible for the personal safety of the Pope since 1506. Vatican City has embassies in 110 countries, and 84 countries have their embassy for the Holy See in Rome. When investigating the value of the Vatican, it gets really interesting. The bottom line is that its value is so astronomically high that we will never be able to establish it. The value of the Apostolic Palace, the Sistine Chapel, and St. Peter's Basilica is estimated at 10 to 15 billion US dollars. But that is only the real estate value. Add the interior golden architecture, tens of thousands of pieces of art, like the priceless resonance paintings, the sculptures and artifacts in more than 26 museums in the Vatican, and it becomes impossible to even imagine what the value could be. The value of the church-owned land throughout the world is another mystery. These properties include Vatican embassies, churches, cathedrals, monasteries, schools and convents. On top of that, the Vatican Apostolic Library contains, according to its own website, another priceless collection of over 180,000 manuscripts, 1.6 million printed books, over 300,000 coins and medallions, and thousands of drawings and engravings, many from pre-Christian and early Christian times. And how many priceless treasures remain hidden in the Vatican's secret archives? We can safely assume that Vatican City is the richest nation in the world. In his book God's Bankers, Gerald Posner explains why the Vatican created its own bank in 1942. By World War II, the Church had sizable investments and created the Vatican Bank in order to hide its financial dealings with the Nazis from the US and the UK. Further on, Posner writes that the Vatican received a substantial church tax from Hitler's Reich every year, amounting to $1.7 billion in today's money in 1943 alone. Over the decades, the Vatican Bank, officially called the Institute for Works of Religion, has been at the center of numerous scandals and accusations of mismanagement, money laundering, and fraud. On top of that, in 2010, the Italian government seized $33 million from the Vatican for money laundering. And until the present day, the church settlements for sex abuse allegations add up to $5 billion. Money laundering, embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, sex scandals. The list is endless. Aren't you amazed about this? As this is the institute that always preaches about sin and guilt. We are talking about one of the biggest religious institutions of the world, with 1.4 billion baptized members, more than 60% of all Christians and almost 18% of the entire world population. How did the Vatican become the religious power center as it has been throughout the ages? To answer that question, we need to know what the Vatican's power is based upon. The Bible tells us in Matthew 16-18, "And I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." We were taught that with this mission, Peter went to Rome and founded the Roman Catholic Church. Peter was the first bishop of Rome who occupied the papal throne for 25 years, 2 months and 3 days. Okay, if these are the facts, let's see if we can find any confirmation of that. What do we know about Peter? First of all, his name was not Peter, but Simon Bar Jonah. Peter was a title given to him by Jesus. The Bible and secular history give us a timeline of Peter's travels after Jesus died. His path looks like a wandering apostle spreading the word, not like a pope ruling for 25 years from the throne of his church. The burial place of Saint Peter gives room for discussion. He could have died in Rome or in Jerusalem. The first is proven with textual evidence, the latter with a gravestone. Is there any archaeological evidence that Peter could have died in Rome? From the 2nd century onward, stories exist about Peter's Tropaion. A tropaion is a specific monument erected to commemorate a victory over one's foes. A tropaion is not a grave. During World War II excavations at the site of St. Peter's Tropaion in Rome, no grave nor bones were found. It wasn't until 1968 that the Vatican officially stated that bone fragments had been found at or near the locations of Peter's grave. They were thought to be the remains of Saint Peter. In 2013, they were displayed to the believers for the first time, only to be given away to the Church of Constantinople in 2019. Why? How? Don't you think this is insane? These bone fragments should have been the cornerstone of the Catholic Church and thus the Vatican. Every important church or cathedral exhibits bones from a saint. They would never give them away. So what is going on here? We will have to dig deeper, going all the way back to the founding of Rome to find our answers. In 753 BC, Rome is founded by Romulus. On the west bank of the Tiber River there was nothing but a hill known as Ager Vaticanus. In ancient times it was forbidden to bury the dead inside the city walls, so the Ager Vaticanus became the burial place for early Roman citizens, Vatican necropolis. At the end of the 1st century BC, the Ager Vaticanus was being developed. Beautiful houses arose, together with the circus of Nero. The Egyptian obelisk, that presently stands in St. Peter's Square, was the center point of the circus. In the next millennium, the Roman Empire rose and then slowly declined. It might have totally collapsed earlier had Emperor Constantine the Great not come into power. This emperor was a great strategist who brought amazing reformations to his waning empire. On October 28, 312 AD, a miracle happened. According to historian Eusebius of Caesarea, Constantine received, just before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, a vision in the sky, accompanied by the words, "In this sign you will conquer." After the victory, Constantine subsequently converted to Christianity. A year later, he allowed Christians to freely practice their faith without being prosecuted. As the ruler of the Roman Empire, Constantine hoped that Christianity could be used to rise his declining empire again. To unify the Christian faith, the emperor convened the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Dogmas, doctrines and creeds saw the day of light. The religious pyramid of power was a fact, with Constantine as head of the Christian Church. Constantine also continued to function as Pontifex Maximus of the empire's pagan priesthood, and in these functions he integrated the pagan rituals and feasts with the teachings of the new faith. Being the strategist Constantine was, he used the new religion as a power tool, a strategy for world dominance, as the Roman Empire was seen as the entire world. A stable political global empire has one global religion. With the word Catholic meaning universal, the Roman Catholic Church was born. It did not matter that not much was left of the original simple teachings of early Christianity. It did not matter that the pagan beliefs were now disguised as Christianity. What did matter was that the world could be dominated again, not with arms as such, but with the Word, the Holy Bible, commissioned by Emperor Constantine himself in 331 AD. Now let's get back to St. Peter. In 318 AD, Emperor Constantine started the building of a basilisk in honor of St. Peter, the old St. Peter's Basilisk. Wait! Stop there! Why in honor of St. Peter, a wandering apostle? Why not honor Jesus, the central figure in Christianity? Well, there was a Peter of great significance who lived in Rome in the 1st century. This was not Simon Bar-Jonah. This Peter's true name was Simon Magus, Simon the magician, master of demons. Simon Magus was a priest of ancient Eastern beliefs, of the Samaritan and Babylonian faiths. In all of Samaria he was believed to be the great power of God. When Simon heard of the new Christian faith, he let himself being baptized a Christian. Simon Magus came to Rome in 42 AD, and stayed there until his death in 67 AD. According to his title, he was called Simon Peter. He intentionally blended Judaism, early Christianity, Babylonian, pagan and Greek beliefs into one universal religion. He delegated himself as the head of this new church in Rome as center of the universe. He deliberately mixed up names and stories. Simon had taken the name of Jesus Christ and much of the terminology of Christianity, and was using these tools to expand his own sphere of influence. He ruled 25 years as such in Rome. Justin Martyr stated, "After Christ's ascension into heaven, the devils put forward certain men who said that they themselves were gods. And they were not only not persecuted by you, but even deemed worthy of honors. There was a Samaritan, Simon, a native of the village called Gitto, who in the reign of Claudius Caesar and in your royal city of Rome did mighty acts of magic by virtue of the art of the devils operating in him. He was considered a god, and as a god was honored by you with a statue, which statue was erected on the river Tiber, between the two bridges, and bore this inscription in the language of Rome: Simoni Deus Sancto, to Simon the Holy God. Simon Magus was literally adored in Rome as a god. He preached the quasi-Trinitarian Gnostic teaching, wherein he, with the title The Great Power of God, appeared to the Jews as a suffering Son of God, to the Samaritans as Father, the primal God above Jehovah, Zeus, and to the pagan world as Holy Spirit. Simon prophesied that he would seem to die in his mortal form, but after 3 days would rise, living in the flesh, and be taken up to the highest heaven. Early historians warned us of Simon's devilish works. Irenaeus states that Simon Magus taught that the Jewish prophecies, the Old Testament, were inspired by the creator angels in a desire to reduce man to slavery. Therefore, those who had hope in him and Helen need not attend to them, but freely do as they would, for that men should be saved according to his grace, and not by any intrinsic quality of their own. Eusebius says, Simon Magus received baptism and feigned Christian belief. And what is more surprising, the same thing is done even to this day by those who follow his most impure heresy. Eusebius goes on, Simon was the author of all heresy. From his time down to the present, those who have followed his heresy have feigned the sober philosophy of the Christians, and they fall down before pictures and images of Simon himself, and they venture to worship him and Helena with incense and sacrifices and libations. Schaaf's History of the Christian Church tells us, the author of this baptized heatheism is Simon Magus, who unquestionably adulterated Christianity with pagan ideas and practices, and gave himself out in a pantheistic style for an emanation of God. Church historian Adolf from Harnack says, Simon Magus proclaimed a doctrine in which the Jewish faith was strangely and grotesquely mixed with Babylonian myths, together with some Greek additions. The mysterious worship, whose aim was a universal religion, all contributed to gain adherents for Simon. Could it be, just as an open assumption, that this Simon Magus is the foundation of the religious power of the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church? And if so, what is the relation between Simon Magus and the name Peter? Forgotten throughout history, the term Peter is a title. This title stems from ancient pagan beliefs. Peter does mean rock or stone, and in ancient temples, stones are worshipped as a means of communication with the gods. A person being a stone, a Peter, means being a priest. It means interpreter, inter-Peter, between God and man. Ancient history goes even further by revealing to us that a Peter usually held keys in his hands, symbol for the secrets he could unlock. Around 300 years after true Christianity started in Judea, its counterpart, a universal power tool under the guise of religion, was firmly established in Rome when Emperor Constantine deliberately founded the Catholic Universal Church on the grave of this fake apostle Simon Peter. That, my friends, is why the biggest and most important temple on earth is the St. Peter Basilisk in Rome. They never lied about their origins, we just didn't see it. When the Roman form of Christianity became the state religion of the empire under Constantine, men saw less need for the return of Christ and sought to establish their own ecclesiastical empire with Rome, not Jerusalem, as its headquarters. Do you want proof about this new religion being a power tool for world domination? Just think about colonization, forced conversion, crusades, persecution of witches, the Papal and Jesuit Inquisition. Countless historians tell us about genocides and hideous murders all over the world in the name of God to eradicate opponents of the Roman Catholic Church. The little flock which constituted the true Church of God were now classified as heretics by Constantine's Christian Empire, and true to prophecy were forced to flee into the wilderness or die as martyrs for their faith. Need I speak to you of the 30 Years' War in Germany, which was mainly instigated by the Jesuits in order to deprive the Protestants of the right of free religious worship secured to them by the Treaty of Augsburg? Or of the Irish Rebellion? Of the inhuman butchery of about 15 million of Indians in South America, Mexico and Cuba by the Spanish Papists? In short, it is calculated by authentic historians that Papal Rome has shed the blood of 68 million of the human race in order to establish her unfounded claims to religious dominion. Spain, the number of condemned exceeded 3 million, with almost 300,000 burned at the stake. Italy. Between the 12th and 16th century, the Papal Inquisition killed 2 million Waldensians regardless age nor sex. The Catholic crusade against the Albigenses in southern France was one of the bloodiest tragedies in human history. The number of Albigenses that perished in the 20 Years' War is estimated at from 1 to 2 millions. In Béziers, France, July 1209, kill them all, for the Lord knows those that are his. Every man, woman and child in the city of Béziers was killed. 20,000 people died in one day. No memorial, no statue, just this one small sign next to the church in which they were burned alive. The Cathars, the Huguenots and Waldenses completely destroyed and forgotten cultures of pure Christians. When new continents were discovered in the Golden Age, the Church expanded its empire by means of colonization and cultural genocide. From East India to Australia, from the Americas and Canada, the indigenous people have been murdered and their children re-educated and rendered infertile. The Age of Enlightenment was used by the Jesuits as the sworn army of the Pope to execute the Roman plan of conquering the world, annihilating native populations, enslave what was left of them, destroy original cultures, languages and religions, and make the Roman Catholic Church the world's dominant religion. The native Australian Aboriginals were annihilated from 1.5 million in 1788 to less than 100,000 in 1901. Until the 1960s, the Aboriginals fell under the Flora and Fauna Act, classifying them as animals, not human beings. The genocide continued until the late 20th century. By this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever does not righteousness is not of God, neither is he that loveth not his brother. As we've discovered in this episode, the Babylonian Simon Magus was the first pope, and all popes have been his successors. Let me repeat that. The popes are the successors of Simon Magus, the Babylonian Peter, not of Jesus Christ. Would it be strange to think about the popes as Antichrist then? In 991 AD, Bishop Arnulf of Orleans described papal murder, lust and intrigue. He suggested that the Pope had to be the Antichrist, sitting in the temple of God and showing himself as God. King James I of England and Scotland wrote an article about the Book of Revelations, in which he called Rome Babylon and the seat of the Antichrist. Martin Luther, a Catholic priest, began criticizing the Pope in 1517 as the Antichrist. Beware the Antichrist, the Pope. Martin Luther criticized the Church for selling indulgences to reduce the amount of punishment for sin. He opposed celibacy and the ban on priests to marry, as this is not mentioned in the Bible. He exposed the corruption and immorality in the Church. There is buying, selling, bartering, trading, trafficking, lying, deceiving, robbing, stealing, and every sort of contempt of God, and even the rule of Antichrist could not be more scandalous. It horrified Luther that the Pope had more authority than the Scriptures. A passage of canon law stated that the Pope could not be disposed from office even if he were so scandalously bad that he led multitudes of souls to the devil. Luther was equally horrified over the Pope's claim to power over earthly authorities and even over angels. Luther said about the Pope, "If he is not Antichrist, then let someone else tell me who he can be. The Pope doesn't have a hair's breadth of power to change what Christ has made, and whatever of these things he changes, he does as a tyrant and Antichrist." In 1545, Luther described the Pope not only as Antichrist, but also as the devil's figure. 3 times he referred to the Pope as the most hellish father. He called him a teacher of lies, blasphemy and idolatries, a murderer of kings, an inciter to all kinds of bloodshed, a brothel keeper above all brothel keepers and all vermin. The popes must, he said, be exposed and refuted, so the people could be corrected and liberated from the tyranny of Satan. Is there evidence for these blunt statements of Luther? Yes, there is. Let's have a look at some documented quotes from the popes themselves, shall we? Pope Innocent III said, "We may, according to the fullness of our power, dispose of the law and dispense above the law. Those whom the Pope of Rome doth separate, it is not a man that separates them, but God. For the Pope holdeth place on earth, not simply of a man, but of a true God." Pope Innocent III was the most powerful of all popes. He claimed to be the vicar of Christ, the vicar of God, and the supreme sovereign over the Church and the world. He claimed the right to depose kings and princes, and that all things on earth and in heaven and in hell are subject to the figure of Christ. Anyone who attempts to construe a personal view of God which conflicts with Catholic Church dogma must be burned without pity. Pope Boniface VIII thought even higher of himself. "I have the authority of the King of Kings. I am all in all and above all, so that God himself and I, the figure of Christ, have but one consistory, and I am able to do almost all that God can do. What, therefore, can you make of me but God?" Pope Pius IX regarded himself as successor of Jesus Christ. "I alone am the successor of the apostles, the vicar of Jesus Christ. I am the way, the truth, and the life." Pope Pius X finalized by stating, "The Pope is not simply the representative of Jesus Christ. On the contrary, he is Jesus Christ himself, under the veil of the flesh. Does the Pope speak? It is Jesus Christ who is speaking. Hence, when anyone speaks of the Pope, it is not necessary to examine, but to obey." "2,000 years of deceit, bloodshed, annihilating entire populations, of secret societies and hidden armies. The Roman Catholic Church made this world into a hellish place, promising heaven for the obedient herd, in an afterlife they themselves apparently didn't bother too much about. Let me show you some more evidence of the Church's ties with evil. From Masonic to Satanic. And of course the child abuse. Pope Francis apologizes and asks for forgiveness, and claims Satan is real. A very last question that I've had from early childhood on has been answered now. I want to share it with you, as you might have had the same unanswered question. Each and every time I entered a church, I got a creepy feeling when I looked at Jesus, hanging there, being crucified, bleeding and suffering. A priest once explained to me that only Roman Catholic churches were obliged to have a crucifix for everyone to see. What does the crucifix mean? The symbol of the cross existed as a sacred symbol for millennia before the birth of Christ. It has been used throughout the ages to ward off evil. It wasn't until 312 AD that Emperor Constantine turned it into the symbol of Christ. This equal-armed cross became the Roman symbol of conquest and protection. It wasn't until the 6th century that the symbol of the cross became the way it is today. It wasn't until the 11th century that these empty crosses were replaced by crucifixes. And it wasn't until the 14th century that these crucifixes became common good. Why? Why was it necessary to force the crucifix upon every believer? Crucifixion means the nailing to the cross. It was an incredibly painful and humiliating death, inflicted by the Romans upon their enemies, mostly political opponents. Remember the Tropaion from earlier in this episode? A Tropaion is a specific monument erected to commemorate a victory over one's foes. It spreads the message for everyone to see. Do not disobey us, or else. That was the message back then, but crucifixion itself ended in 337 AD. So is there another reason why we still see the image of the suffering Jesus Christ everywhere around us? Weren't we told that Jesus suffered and died on the cross for our sins? Don't you feel guilty when you look at a crucifix thinking about that? The Roman Catholic regime needed a symbol to make you feel powerless instead of protected. Guilt is the emotion that makes you absolutely submissive. So, the crucifix, the symbol of the conquest of Jesus the Christ. The Cabal shows us 24/7 we conquered the Christ. And on top of that, you are supposed to feel guilty about it. Genius again, don't you think? In the course of centuries, a sacred and protective symbol was slowly turned into a symbol of humiliation and guilt, hanging in millions of churches, homes, crossroads, and around billions of necks, imprinting in your subconscious each and every day. Reverse the symbol and Satanists are proud to show it off. All that is left for me to say is that light will always conquer the dark. All that is needed is the awareness that there is dark. From that moment on, the smallest candle will light the darkest of caves. Ephesians said, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light." John says, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Ephesians says again, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." We're not done yet. I wish we were, but there's even more to tell. Would you like to know the origins of New Age, the Ascended Masters, and what they have in common with Satanism? Then follow me to part 4 of this conclusion to the fall of the Cabal.